Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name is Jared Mello. Normally, I'll make videos here about narcissism, radical self-respect, relationships, and I'll do some interviews. And I'm still trying to get around to doing videos about supplements too, so stay tuned for that. I used to make a lot more videos about supplements, but any good wizard, they need some potions and concoctions, and I'm going to get back to talking about them because God knows I take a lot of them myself. And also, I've started a community on Telegram, a radical self respect community. And it's a place for people to talk about their issues, trying to practice radical self respect, healing the trauma bond. And it gives other community members an opportunity to share their experience. And when they share their experience and they're trying to help someone else, it also serves to help them too. So that's pretty cool. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and remember to like the video at the end if you liked it and comment below if you have experience with today's topic. Now, today's topic is going to be, does the narcissist control your finances? And often this is narcissistic financial abuse is what it is. So if you have experience with that, please comment that below. But to a narcissist, it's all about control to a narcissist. In my interview with HG Tudor, he believes that control is the number one thing. You boil everything down to the lowest common denominator, you find control at the bottom. Of all the kinds of supply and all the kinds of fuel, control is what it all comes down to. And a narcissistic person will think, what better way to control others than to control their finances and every cent that they spend? And I mostly see this amongst women who are in a relationship with a guy, a narcissistic guy, and the narcissistic guy is in complete control of how every cent is spent. And the woman maybe gets an allowance, but everything that she does, she has to run it by the guy. And this gives the guy ultimate control. And I don't want to pretend like this is the only kind of situation this happens in. I see it happen in family. I see it happen in friend situations too, or executors of a will, all of these kinds of things. These happen too. But either way, it's not a good situation for the person who feels stuck in this situation and is stuck a lot of times. It's not a good situation for them, and it doesn't feel very good, and they can feel trapped. But the narcissistic person, they get off on this level of control and power. And the woman or whoever it is, they have to beg the narcissistic person for any kind of money to do anything. Everything that woman does is tracked, and they're tracked by the narcissistic person. And it becomes really difficult for the woman, in this case, to gather the resources to leave. And this happens for a couple different reasons too. Number one, narcissistic people love to isolate the victim from their friends, family, and support system. I always think about how now Meghan Markle has taken Prince Harry to California. And we all know from listening to H.G. Tudor what he thinks about Meghan Markle. But that's the playbook. And there certainly happens in other cases too. But they'll take you away from your support system. Correct. It does not hold a gender. And they'll take you away from your support system. And at that point, you are more reliant on the narcissistic person at that point. And that's right where the narcissistic person wants you. They want you more reliant on them, dependent on them, because that gives them more fuel and it makes them feel more powerful and they have more control in that situation. The other problem with this is the narcissistic person is probably gaslighting the victim into thinking that they need them. They won't be able to live on their own without the narcissistic person. And it gets the person who is being controlled, they start believing it if they hear it enough. And at that point, the trauma bond is pretty thick at that point. So they feel stuck. And they often are because they don't have those resources. And this is why it's so difficult to leave. It's so difficult to leave because the narcissistic person, they have controlled every avenue of the person's life. They feel like there is no way out. There is nowhere to turn. And they certainly don't have the money to go. That's why I fully admit this is one of the hardest situations to break free from. But how do you do it? And I think there are steps to be taken, and they're not easy. I'm not going to pretend any of this is easy, but what's the alternative? Staying stuck and living as a prisoner? I can't accept that. I think you got to try one way or the other. And I recognize it's hard. I'm not saying it's not, but we got to at least try in these kinds of situations. So the first thing to try to do is reach out to any friends, family, or support that you have and see what kind of help they would be willing to give you. If you have good friends, which I know the narcissistic person might have cut you off and isolated them or spread massive smear campaigns against you to make this alternative less likely. But regardless, you got to try. Maybe you have a friend that would let you stay with them. Maybe you have a family member that would let you stay with them. But you got to ask to see, because if you don't ask, you'll never get an answer either way. You miss all the shots you don't take, so you may as well try. Be honest about the situation that you're in. You say, hey, I feel like I'm in a relationship with a narcissistic person. They are controlling every aspect of my life. They are controlling my finances. I need help. And you ask with humility and honesty for help. And you tell them about your situation. And it's certainly not an easy situation. Absolutely not. But you ask and see what they say. Maybe you'll be lucky enough for one of them to say, hey, come stay with me for a little bit. Get out of there. And then this leaves another issue. A lot of people are then afraid what their narcissistic person's going to say or do when they leave. And this is not an unjustified fear, because sometimes it can be a dangerous situation when you leave, which is why you also got to make a plan to leave, notify friends, family, maybe even law enforcement. And that way, the results and the consequences will be the least likely to be violent and dangerous. But you can't overlook that part, because they do and can get dangerous, especially the malignant variety and the more psychopathic variety. That is a dangerous situation. When they feel the threat of losing control, you can't ignore that part of it. So, but don't worry about it either way. Yeah, they'll probably be mad no matter what. If you get out from under their grasp, they are not going to be happy about it. But you know what I say to that? So what? They're going to be upset with you, but they do not care one bit if you are upset with them. They do not care one bit about your feelings or your thoughts or your opinions. So you should follow suit and not give one bit of thought about what they think about it as well. And so in this case, what happens is you got to just be okay with making that person upset, because they are going to be upset. Any threat to their control and to their power and their fuel will indeed make them upset. But you got to just go through with it anyway. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is just being stuck and staying there forever and being miserable. And these first couple steps, they're going to be the most uncomfortable, but eventually you can get jiggy with it. And you'll think to yourself, wow, how did I even put up with all of that as long as I did? And the very thought of being with them will make you cringe anyway. So the first steps, like I said, reach out to friends, family, and your support. See if they can offer you any assistance or any help. If you don't have a job, which is likely that you don't, because a narcissistic person probably does not want you working, but try to get a job so that you can at least build up some resources and a nest egg. And again, I know that's not always possible. You might have to leave to begin working, but first things first, if you can, try to do it. And at that point, even if you make money and you have a job, yeah, the narcissistic person, they might try to take your money too. They might try to take your paycheck and say, that paycheck belongs to me. And of course, that wouldn't do you much good in that case either, if you're working and they just take your money. So that wouldn't be very good as well. So I see you talking here, and I haven't been reading what you're saying, but there's some text here. Yep, the narcissistic person will always claim to be the victim, even though they're the one gaslighting and abusing others. Absolutely. The small children can't let them turn out like that. That's why. Yes, that's another good reason why, because, yeah, the narcissistic person, they will traumatize their children, and people do become like the people they surround themselves with. So If there's a narcissistic parent, they are teaching those narcissistic adaptations to the children. That's another thing. If you can't do it for yourself, and there are a lot of people that are in a trauma bond, their self worth is pretty low. They don't feel too good about themselves. They don't think they deserve much. And part of this is the conditioning that the narcissistic person has given you. They purposefully want you to think that, because when you feel less of yourself, when your self worth is low, when your self respect is low, you are the most controllable. That's exactly where the narcissistic person wants you. But think of it like this: if you can't do it for yourself, think about your children and try to do it for them. And you got to treat yourself the way you would treat someone you really care about. And for people that are in a codependent situation like that, in a trauma bond, that's one of the hardest things for them to do. But that's why it's such good advice to treat yourself the way you would treat someone you really care about. I can't emphasize that point enough. My experience. Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing about YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and everything, is that there's all these resources now, and there's people that understand. And there's communities like the one I've created, but there's also other communities out there too, where you can learn about this stuff. And there are people that are willing to share their experience, and they're going to try to help. And that's all awesome. And that's one of the good things that social media like this has done. For all the negatives, this is one of the good things that's happened, where there's more awareness of narcissism, cluster B personality disorders than there's ever been. And that's a good thing, because once you see them, once you see the behaviors, once you see the patterns, you can't unsee it anymore. And that's why I always call it, the first time you see it is like a sixth sense moment. And that's pretty cool. So once you've talked to your friends and family members and support system, maybe they can't help you. Maybe there's nowhere you can turn. What do you do then? Well, the next thing would be, depending on where you live, you got to check the resources around you locally. And this will be determined by where you live, of course, because everywhere is going to have a little bit different resources. But you see what kind of things are available for single mothers or single parents, and you see what they say. You might be surprised at the resources that are available. Another option would be checking out church groups or other religious organizations. See what they say, because they may have some stuff going on that is unrelated to the state, county, or wherever you are. Or if you're in another country, whatever the districts or towns are like there. But they can operate and do things in a way that the state sometimes won't be able to, because they're their own private entity. So they don't have to play by the same rules. But I'm only saying this because it's just another one of your options. And there's other groups out there. And sometimes there's just organizations that are nationwide too that you can call. There are 1-800 numbers. There's the self-deletion hotline, for lack of a better word. And there's all these other kinds of domestic violence hotlines. These are the kinds of things to call that they will have the resources on hand to say, yes, this is where you are. You should probably call this person. You should probably call this resource. And again, the narcissistic person wants people to not do any of this. And they've programmed people to believe there is no way out. There's no way out. There's nothing you can do. And eventually people may begin to believe it, even if it's not true. And again, I don't want to say that it's not hard to get out. It absolutely is difficult. It might be one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do. But you got to explore all of these options. So at the state level, you call them. At the county level, you call them. You call church groups if possible. If there's any other secular groups in your area, call them too. And then look for all of these hotlines, etc. They can point you in the direction of things that maybe the state and the counties and the towns, maybe they don't even know about. But these are all the things to try to do. And in my experience, and again, I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience here or gaslight them, but when we really try day by day, day after day, as hard as we can, I find it to be more rare that people really can't find a way out. But it takes a lot of footwork. I don't want to pretend like it doesn't take a lot of footwork. It absolutely does. But you try all of those things, there's at least a shot. And At the very worst, maybe you find some sort of good Samaritan out there that's willing to take you in, that it's not going to be a dangerous situation. That's always a possibility too. But I gotta believe that there is a shot, there is a way out in these kinds of situations. And again, I want to encourage people and push people without invalidating them, because there are some people I've spoken to where they're just convinced, they've tried everything and they're just stuck. And me personally, I have a hard time with that, because I try to say, is there really every stone's been turned? You every possible way has. And maybe it has. Maybe it has, but I still think for everyone else, you got to at least try all of these steps, because what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is nothing, and you stay stuck in the situation. That's the worst that can happen. So you got to try. And so to reiterate the whole video here again, one, narcissists love control, whether it's a male narcissist, female narcissist, it doesn't matter. It's genderless, as the commenter said there. And they love control, and they think there's no better way to control people than to control their finances and to control every cent that they spend, to get them begging for money for groceries or money for clothes for the children. They get off on that sense of power and control. And when they control the finances, everything has to run through them. And that's exactly how they want it. Secondly, they've probably conditioned and programmed the victim, the codependent person, to be believing that there is no way out, that they need the narcissist, that they wouldn't be able to live on their own and they would flounder. And this is the kind of conditioning that makes the person who is in the trauma bond more reliant on the narcissistic person. That's why that conditioning is poisonous. It's poisonous because it does nothing more than to enhance the trauma bond even more strongly than it's already been. So that's all poison too. But remember, that's what they want you to believe. And they've probably also cut you off from your resources, your friends, family, and support system. That's by design too, because the further you are away from them, the more dependent on the narcissistic person you are. And even if there are friends and family around, often there's been smear campaigns against you as well. So that comes into play here too. So one of the things, if the smear campaign hasn't gotten to the friends and family, honesty and humility about the situation, I think, are huge, because maybe they've listened to a little bit of the smear campaign and maybe they even believe it. And maybe one of the flying monkeys, they ask you about it and you get really upset and defensive. Unfortunately, even though they're kind of gaslighting you, it will make you look more guilty in a way where they react. They're going to call out your reaction, the reactive abuse type thing. And that's why to say, you can't let the other people, what the flying monkeys believe, you can't let that bother you either, even though it's really hard. And I've heard some terrible stories of all the things that narcissistic people and their flying monkeys have done, getting law enforcement involved, harassing others, getting people to feel like they're a threat, to be violent or a threat to themselves. It can be pretty heinous what they do. And a lot of it's because they get this sense of schadenfreude from torturing people. They get off on it a lot of times. And it's really unfortunate and sad. But all the more reason to try to get the heck out of there and make a plan, because it does get dangerous sometimes if you just try to leave. Any threats to the narcissistic person's control can be potentially a dangerous situation. So once you've recognized those parts and you understand, yeah, maybe you're isolated, maybe you're not, but reach out to the friends and family, see if anyone can help you or point you in the direction of someone that can help. If you have a job, see if you can try to save some of the money instead of handing it all over. I know that can be risky too, but what can I say? You got to try in those cases. And if friends and family can help, then you try the state, you try federal, you try county, you try township, and you see what kind of resources are available in your area. If none of those work, you try a church group or some other secular group, and then you can go online and look at all of the nationwide groups that there are too. And if you do all this, chances are, and hopefully, you find some resources that might be able to help you and your children. Because, like one of the commenters said there, you don't want your children being raised in that environment. Chances are the kids will either become narcissistic themselves or they will become the codependent that will attract a narcissistic person later in life. Or maybe they'll become borderline. And one of the reasons people become borderline is they had inconsistent parents. And one second they'll be treated like the golden child, the next second they could be treated like the scapegoat. They have said that is one of the causes of borderline. But regardless, if you're in a situation where there's a narcissistic parent and there's kids in the house, that's not going to be a good situation for those kids. So if you can't do it for yourself, you don't feel like you deserve it, or your self-worth or your self-respect isn't quite where it should be, think about the kids and try to treat yourself in a way that you would treat someone you really care about. So you really care about your kids, do all of this for them, if not for yourself, because you're in the trauma bond and things will become more clear when you get out of the orbit. That's how it was for me. The further I got away, and the more time and space and distance I got between me and them, the healthier I got and the more clearly I began to see things. But when I was stuck there, it becomes really difficult to take a step back and see things with an accurate perspective. And this is one of the reasons why it's so hard, because when you're in it, it is so difficult to see it and you feel stuck, and you are stuck in many cases. So that's why getting this space is crucial. The space, recognizing what you were dealing with, and then getting some space. That's where the healing's at, baby. That's where the recovery from the trauma bond can happen, where hopefully you can go no contact and you can avoid Hoover attempts, avoid the flying monkeys Hoover attempts, where the narcissist has tried to get the flying monkey to attack you and commit abuse by proxy. You can avoid all of that and move forward with your life, because what's the alternative? The alternative is being stuck. The alternative is basically being a prisoner in your own home. And you and your children both, you do not deserve that. So that's why you got to try to do the things I've mentioned in this video. Now, if you're listening to this out there and there is something I missed, please put that in the comment section below, because I wouldn't want to leave out any potential solutions. So whether it's a resource or whatever, please comment on that below. Or if you did get out, just mention what worked for you. How did you do it? Did you get support from friends or family? Did you reach out to the state, to the county, to your township? And did they give you some help? Did you get help through the church? What was it? Did you find a good Samaritan? Did you find some sort of national group or hotline? Please share below, because the information you will share will be absolutely priceless. And you don't know who it's going to help until that person sees it. And I promise you, I talk to people about this stuff all day, every day. And there are people that desperately need this help. So if you've been in that situation and you've gotten out, please comment below and share your experience, because it will absolutely help somebody else. So if you've gotten this far, please remember to subscribe. Like I said, like the video if you liked it, and please share this video with others that you think might benefit. And there are people in this situation. I know there are. I don't want to pretend like it's easy, but we got to at least try to do some of these steps. And if you can't do it for yourself, one, try to treat yourself the way you would treat somebody you really care about, and then think about your children too. Do it for them if you can't do it for yourself. So, yeah, I mean, that's no good too, right? Who's she to you? She's just like her father, violent. Your ex? Yeah, and I want to make this clear too. Sometimes it is the woman who's narcissistic, and sometimes it's the woman who's more of like a matriarchal, bossy, demanding, controlling person. I've seen that in women too. Like, it's not just men who are the ones with doing the financial abuse. There are also women doing it too. And it looks a little different a lot of times. Sometimes it can be more covert when it's the woman, but not always. There is like the boss babe, demanding, controlling girl too. And they aren't covert by any means. They're pretty grandiose and they're pretty loud and boisterous. And they can do just as much damage. And sometimes a woman can do even more damage because there are other guys, they're not going to believe another dude. And they'll say, oh, you just can't handle your woman? Blah, 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 blah. And so they're not going to buy it. And there's other women, they have a hard time criticizing other women too. That's not all. It's not always that way, but there are some. Just like there are some guys who'd have a hard time criticizing women too. I'm not saying that's a majority, but it does happen that way. And it's one of the things that lets a woman's abuse slide under the rug a little bit longer, and they get away with it for longer because people don't believe it. They think, oh, it's just a woman. How bad could it get? Well, the reality is it can get pretty bad. It can get pretty bad, and it's not going to be any easier than it would be with a guy. Both men and women, both, they can both have these kinds of issues. This is not a gender specific issue. And that's one of the cool things about this channel. There are men here with this experience, and there are women here with this experience. And I like being able to talk to everybody about it. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If you have any other questions, doesn't look like there are. But again, please share this video with others that you think might benefit. And again, if you got this far and you've been in this situation where you've had your finances controlled by a narcissistic person, how did you get out? What did you do? Share below how you did it, and you might be able to really save someone's life with this. So with that, again, thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.